Question 2, estimate the values to complete the table. So if we're looking at angle C, that's this angle down here. So this is kind of like the point of view that we're looking at this from. If we have the adjacent leg divided by the hypotenuse, remember this is the adjacent leg for C because it's touching this one. This one is the hypotenuse, and this is the opposite. Okay, and this is all from the perspective of C. If we changed to A, then the opposite and the adjacent would flip-flop places. So if we have the adjacent over the hypotenuse equal to 0.97, we can kind of think of it like this. The adjacent side is 0.97. The hypotenuse is 1 because if we take 0.97 divided by 1, we get 0.97. If we take the opposite over the hypotenuse, we know that the hypotenuse is 1, so this would have to be, the opposite would be 0.26. Okay? Now, if we look at this from the perspective of A, okay, so now instead of this being the angle that we're looking at, now A is going to be the angle that we look at. The hypotenuse is going to stay the hypotenuse because it's relative to the right angle, and the right angle isn't changing positions. But now we're going to look at this story from the perspective of A. Whoops, not C, A. Okay, so now this side becomes the opposite, and this side becomes the adjacent. So the lengths are still going to stay the same. Those lengths don't change. It's just the label that we put on them because we're looking at it from a different perspective. So if we were to take the adjacent divided by the hypotenuse for angle A, we would be taking 0.26 divided by 1. So 0.26. And what you should notice is that it's the same as the opposite over the hypotenuse for C. Because these two are the same length, it's just which angle are you looking at it from. So for A, it's the adjacent over the hypotenuse. For C, it's the opposite over the hypotenuse. And the same thing with this one here. If we take angle A and we do its opposite over the hypotenuse, now this value is going to come up here. This is 0.97. So the only difference really is that with this one, we have 0.27. So with C, the opposite over the adjacent, we have 0.26 divided by 0.97. But in this one, the opposite and the adjacent switch. So now we're going to take the opposite of A divided by the adjacent of A. So here's the opposite, here's the adjacent. So we're going to take 0.97 divided by 0.26, and you should get 0.97 divided by 0.26 is equal to 3.73 approximately.